Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, Indian monopoly. Also, the V-Team takes a look at juvenile justice reform. And the legislature wants a lottery to pay for what?
Close the door open. Get back in your cell!
It's just a malfunction.
Get back!
Just a malfunction.
Prisons. Everybody else, education. Alabama prisons. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Chip's back with us.
Chip, nice to have you
Chip.
back.
Thank you.
Fresh off of finals.
Yeah, so you're headed to Columbia for the Masters in Journalism, right?
Studying politics.
Yeah, that's excellent.
What's
Good.
wrong with a good Southern school, Chip?
I don't know. Nothing's wrong with it.
We're very proud of you. And,
Very, very proud of
very,
you.
very
And I believe
proud.
the youngest student in the program ever.
Yeah, that's our understanding.
I don't know about ever, but you know.
Anyway, you're going to do well.
Yes.
You know, we've talked a lot about the Porch Creek Indians having a monopoly over gaming, which they actually got because Bob Riley thought it was a good idea to try to put everybody else out of business. But the state legislature, Beth, the Republican state legislature, has now passed a bill that, if it becomes law, will in fact pretty much guarantee that that monopoly stays in existence. They've tried to write everybody else out of that bill. And it comes to mind that we have Republican free market players here
That's what they tell us.
that want to give a monopoly to one group over everybody else. Making sense to you?
It doesn't, except for that when something doesn't make sense, we follow the money.
Yeah.
And so if you look up how much Porch Creek is given to some of our legislators, it might make a little more sense. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing is really irrational to me, but the thing that I think really puts it to bed is that a lottery is popular. The people of Alabama have been polled numerous times by numerous entities. We know that a lottery is popular. This will not go into effect for 5 more years, and so we know that this legislature can now run for re-election saying that we gave you the lottery you were asking for, and by the time people realize that they've been bamboozled again by these same people, they will already be re-elected, and there will be nothing they can do about it, and we will have kicked the can down the road, the state motto of Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, Susan, and I think she's absolutely right. But again, competition, we tell, and capitalism, competition is good, right?
Competition is good. It keeps everybody on a, an even keel, keeping their I's dotted and their T's crossed, and it's just a good thing. It always has been. And why they want to give it just to this one group is just outrageous.
It is, and it makes no sense. I mean, of course, Chip, we were talking the other day, and I wrote about this. If all of a sudden the Porch Creek Indians were the only people that made socks in Alabama, and the state legislature said, we just want the Porch Creek to make socks, and people were going, well, wait a minute, we would like some of these socks sent out of state. And so they said, okay, well, the government now is going to make socks. They're going to be crappy socks, and they'll get holes in them. They won't last you long. But if it makes you happy, you don't have to drive out of state to get your crappy socks. I mean, would that make any sense in any kind of real world?
No, I mean it doesn't. But don't you know that a lottery is a vice, Bill? And you have to limit it because it's a vice, unlike every other thing that we consume in a capitalist society. But I think the main thing about this is that not only does it solidify this monopoly for this organization of people who don't pay taxes on it.
Right.
It's not going to benefit the state of Alabama, but the lottery that we're putting in is going to be in a constitutional amendment that is unlikely to ever change. Mm-hmm. The people are going to approve it because they want a lottery, and like you said, they're going to be duped into believing that this is going to be a good thing. And then it's going to be, it's not even going to be worth having in 10 years when nobody buys paper lottery tickets.
Yeah,
anymore.
because it'll be, as Dale Marsh, one of the guys who sponsored the bill, got up and said, well, I mean, it's going to be obsolete in a few years, but hey, this is Alabama. We can't have anything.
That's
nice.
because the point of this is not to have a lottery.
Dang, duped again, right? And
Yes.
I take your point about vice, but so smoking and drinking and
Oh yeah, I was 100% kidding.
and all that.
Food
But the
and
government,
soft drinks. I mean, all
Yeah.
of that is.
Yeah,
also-
but you
I
know, the
have-
government doesn't restrict what kind of alcohol I can buy. I can buy either, you know, Bluebell beer or whatever, or
yeah,
I
you
can
can
buy.
get your Tito's made in America,
Yeah.
or you can get your Russian stolen.
Yeah,
you can get it
right.
whatever you want.
We
It's
don't
all
care.
yours.
Right.
No.
No.
Well, this
monopoly
government
doesn't.
doesn't like telling people what they can do to their bodies. Remember that.
Oh, well, that's true.
Yeah, but you know, if I've got a vice, and back in the day when we had, dry counties, people drove across the county line to buy their alcohol.
No.
You drive across the state line to get your.
You
You
ever
know where-
been
where-
up to
you
Smith
know
Lake
where-
on a Sunday?
You know where?
I mean, we're kidding ourselves too, because we're saying that, you know, this is going to fix the problem of people going to spend money on a lottery in Georgia or Tennessee and
Yeah.
soon to be Mississippi.
Right.
But it's not, because people our age are not going to go to a gas station in Alabama and buy a paper Powerball ticket.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what we do anymore.
No.
So
Well, and
Their think it through has always
to
been
talk to
busted. It's just
somebody.
getting worse, okay?
we've got about a minute and a half left. I want to get to this next one. So we thought that this outrageous idea about using the meager funds we get off the lottery, which is basically going to be about $75 million a year, if at all. And Beth, what we want to use it for is to build prisons.
Yeah, so I'm real confused about this because there's this thing called the school to prison pipeline, right? And if we fund education, we have to spend less money funding prisons, because when people are educated, studies have shown crime drop. So I'm a little
Using that word again that I've warned you about since you
Logic.
You putting logic into it, and they have none.
But instead, Susan, of saying we're going to put some money in education, like other states, we go, oh, hell no, we put it in prisons, baby. We're going to build prisons.
I wonder what John Rogers has to say about that.
No, I mean, this is silly.
I mean, but they just passed the biggest education trust fund budget ever.
Yes.
You know, our schools are so great, they have so much money. We don't need a lottery.
Nah,
We don't
right.
need a lottery.
Is all that money actually going to our schools?
We'll talk
No, I
about,
don't know about that.
we're going
Yeah.
to talk about that in the next couple of segments. But again, the rest of the world says, hey, let's educate our kids for a brighter tomorrow. The legislators in Alabama say,
Lock 'em up.
Lock them up, baby, lock them up. And it really does go to show. I was talking to a friend of mine who he looked at this legislative session and said, it's the worst I've ever seen. He said, I feel like a country dog come to the city. And I said, what's that? He said, well, when a country dog comes to the city, he goes back home. They say, how was it? He says, well, if I stood still, they peed on me. And if I ran, they bit me in the butt.
That's about
And
right.
that's kind of how I feel right now.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and opinion.
You've always dreamed of owning a home and investing in your community, but where do you start? Ask a local realtor about Alabama's new first-time homebuyer savings account. If you're looking to buy your first home or are re-entering the market after 10 years, contact your realtor to learn how to set up a tax-free savings account at any Alabama financial institution. Savings of up to $50,000 can be used as your down payment or towards closing costs. The first step on the road to home ownership. Let us help you get there.
Hey man, what are you doing today?
Play the game. Thought I'd go out for a drive later, maybe. Text some friends while I'm doing it. Scroll through social media. Kill a family 4 and a head on collision.
Cool, man.
Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
A lot can change in 5 years. Except those smile lines you treated with Bellafill. Because that's about how long Bellafill will keep them smooth and filled. 5 years. Now you can always look your best without all those injections, appointments, and costs. Belafil is the only dermal filler that stimulates and maintains collagen growth long term. Now time is on your side.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Chip, former judge Jim Hill is now in the State House. He's a representative, and Senator Cam Ward are offering bills that would reform our juvenile justice system, the way we handle juvenile justice. Can you share with our viewers kind of what's happening there?
The idea with this bill is to expand pretrial diversion programs and to take kids who, are accused of nonviolent offenses, things like drug possession, multiple drug possessions, things like that, and to put them into pretrial diversion programs so that they don't have to go to juvenile detention.
Right.
Because we have, so many kids in juvenile detention that we're spending so much money on. Studies show that if you put a kid into juvenile detention, they're more than likely going to go into an adult prison. Right. We know that we have horrible overcrowding issues in our adult prisons.
Well, we're going to solve a lot of them with the lottery.
And they say that this bill would save like $26 million over 5 years. And they would take that money and put it back into pretrial diversion programs and educational programs, rehab programs.
Well, Susan, we've seen this with drug courts. We've seen the drug courts, from what we've seen, show tremendous success.
And Jim Hill has some firsthand knowledge of those drug courts. They had a very successful program in St. Clair County for years now. So he has some real hands-on experience with seeing people, putting people in that program and seeing the progress that they made. And so, listen, we've known people that ended up in juvenile detention, and one boy he went to jail for drugs at a young age, came out, was fine for a few years, and then murdered his sister.
He was sexually abused in prison and mentally abused in prison.
Very
that he was a broken.
He was
individual.
so broken.
That was what I was saying. And Chip hit the nail on the hand with the recidivism rate too, because we do not have a strong record for constitutional rights in our detention centers here in the state of Alabama. And so, you put minors whose brains are still forming, they're still developing, and you put them in that traumatic situation, and you give them fewer opportunities to actually succeed when they come out.
And it's something different when you're talking about a violent offense. A violent offense is something totally different than what we're talking about. We're talking about the small stuff.
This bill would have nothing to do with murder or even like armed robbery or burglary or something like that.
Well, and one other thing,
nonviolent offenses.
And I sometimes, Cam Ward knows a lot about the judicial system, has worked. Jim Hill has a career as one of the toughest judges.
You did not want to be on the other side of the bar.
You did not want to be on the other side.
I can tell you that.
But the thing about it is he's always been fair. And sometimes you can look at a bill and say, all right, I may have some questions about this bill. When you see somebody like Judge Hill behind it, most of the time you can say, all right, we can assume that this is probably a pretty good bill. Now let's dig into it a little further. So far, we're hearing people are split on this. There are some people in law enforcement that think it's way too lenient, and there's judges that want more control, Beth. But overall, this is a measure, I believe, that's a broader picture of how do we convince the Department of Justice not to take over our prison.
Yeah, because it's a much bigger story than just juvenile justice reform. This kind of goes with the topic of education, is you have to look at policy as a state as this big, collection of things that play together. And this is one of those that if you can fix this one part of the pipeline, then maybe you have few thousand people fewer in prisons.
Well, it's a lot easier to educate a child than it is to reform a child once they're in prison. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
Well, and keep in mind when students go into a detention center, they're now being pulled out of school. They're being pulled out of what would be a healthy social network, or what could be a healthy social network, and put into a place where every child is one who is in need of support. And so it's just not socially, educationally, across the board, it's not.
This should not be a liberal or conservative issue. This is a justice issue. We know how to be tough on crime. Can we learn to be smart on crime? I think that's the thing we're asking here. I tell you, Beth, and you live in Jefferson County in Birmingham, the city of Birmingham. And a couple of years ago, city of Birmingham said, look, we want to raise our minimum wage to $10 an hour. The federal,
10.10.
Yeah, the federal minimum wage is set, what, $7.25?
$7.25.
Nobody can live off $7.25 an hour.
No,
so they wanted to raise it to 10. They did pass a bill, they raised it, and then the state legislature said no. And that's being litigated right now.
Right, it is. So, I mean, when I was in the legislature working with Representative Melton, we did the minimum wage bill here, and of course it got slapped down pretty handily. And some people that we were working with decided, we can go through the municipalities and start raising it in that way. And Birmingham did pass it. The city decided that, and anybody who's looked at what housing costs in Birmingham, my 700 square foot apartment was $700 a month just for that little space. You can't live off of it. It's not doable. So the city raised the wage. And then I think it was the day after Birmingham's minimum wage was to go into effect, the state legislature's law went in saying, no, municipalities, you cannot do this on your own. So, I hope they succeed. I hope they give, because the thing is, the cost of living in Birmingham and the cost of living in Attala is vastly different. Yeah. And so I think this could be a good solution.
And Susan, our state is notorious for not allowing home rule. In other words, all the power is concentrated in Montgomery.
Right, and it's constitutionally that way is the problem. The founders of the writers of the 1901 Constitution did it that way deliberately in revolt of carpetbaggers coming down here. So now the legislature actually has a foot to stand on constitutionally, but can we get this into a court that will say, well, maybe that's outdated now?
Yeah, well, Chip, it's you would almost have to think that at some point cities could make up their own mind. But that's not the case.
That's the argument they tried to make in this lawsuit. Yeah. They had a couple of different parts to it. One of those was that the legislature, a majority white legislature, was taking away the power from a municipality that's majority African American. Yeah. And that was one of the arguments that they tried to make, that they were violating their voting rights. The other one was that the bill was discriminatory because most of the people that would have affected in Jefferson County or in Birmingham were black. The court said you can argue the racial discrimination side, but you can't argue the voting rights.
Well, and my opinion is, I think the bozos in Birmingham know a little bit what's better for the bozos in Birmingham than the bozos in Montgomery, who don't live in Birmingham, want for Birmingham.
Right, which is the same argument our state legislature makes whenever Congress tries to tell them something.
All right, well, that's going to be the last word on this one. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
What a great opportunity for your success. Adding 500,000 highly skilled employees to our workforce by 2025 is how we stay ahead in Alabama. Our economy is stronger than it's been in years, and a skilled workforce is more important than ever. Things move fast, so choose your path. Your success is waiting, plus a great future for Alabama. Success Plus. Go for it.
The Energy Institute of Alabama promotes reliable, affordable, and clean energy to help grow our economy, create high-paying jobs, and build public support for Alabama's energy industry. The Energy Institute of Alabama is the best source of energy industry information and how it affects households across the state, from convenient energy production to alternative fuels to solar power and beyond.
What are you doing today, babe?
I thought I'd head down to the lake with the guys, do a little fishing. Of course, none of us will be wearing our seatbelts. I'll lose control of the truck, wrap it around a tree, and kill us all.
Okay.
Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. Susan, we've seen some egregious things come out of the State House, especially this session. I mean, it has been as if the wolves now have complete control and they don't care that anyone sees them as wolves anymore. But we have a situation where the CHIPS program, which is basically a health insurance program for low-income children, and that CHIPS program now is in dire need of funding. And the previous administration under Obama, that program was paid for 100% by the federal government. The Trump administration came in and said that the federal government would pay 80%, the state would pay 20%. So we have to come up with our 20% match, which surprisingly we didn't have. Kay Ivey asked that the $36 million we needed come out of the education trust fund. It was in there. And then Senator Arthur Orr, who heads the trust fund, took that $36 million out, leaving CHIPS in limbo.
Yes,
where did he put it?
In that discretionary fund. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's a discretionary fund where legislators can go in and take money out to give their local band uniforms or things like that. In other words, it's stuff that we can't really see, as opposed to being an education budget where we can actually monitor.
So the $36 million that Kay wanted for CHIPS, that's not about education, but you could argue that healthy children is good for them to have be healthy.
Perform better in school.
So they took that money, Beth, and then put it into pork spending?
Yeah, so this is just going to be like a line item that each legislator can just spend it wherever they want, however they want, with no oversight. $36 million.
And
what do our kids get out of this?
I mean, and we're talking about it's going to go up to like 100,000. I mean, 100 million next year, isn't it?
Over the next 2 years, it's going to be, our portion will be $100 million.
I swear to God, and people are straight ticket Republican because they have no, this blows my mind. So you're taking health insurance away from low-income children who, through no fault of their own, don't have health care, and giving it to a bunch of pigs in their pork spending in Montgomery.
Yeah. And these are the kids.
And we're not outraged.
No, really. These are the kids that their parents make too much money from Medicaid, but not enough for commercial health insurance. They're kind of caught in limbo. I mean, these are working folks. They're not folks that are on welfare. I mean, they're working folks.
You know, the fundamentals of education are you've got to have a healthy kid to show up to go to school. Right. If you feed them, that's a plus too. But Chip, this is just sort of, in my thinking, sort of, financial malpractice.
I mean, it really is. I mean, the amount of money that we're going to have to pay for CHIP over the next 10 years is probably going to be somewhere in the range of $1 billion. Yeah. And they're not planning ahead. And I mean, this
But
kick the can down the road.
But if the CFO did this to the shareholders, they would be strung through court for malfeasance.
I mean, this makes me angry because there are 220,000 kids in Alabama that rely on All Kids, which is the Alabama version of CHIP.
Right.
My namesake program.
But I mean, and look how great you turned out.
I know. I was never on CHIP. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's nothing else to say. It's egregious.
It's egregious.
It is. And again, Arthur Orr, if anybody wants to thank him for doing that, giving his buddies a slush fund over the children of Alabama getting health care.
I mean, and maybe it shouldn't come out of the education trust fund.
Right.
I get
That's
that
an argument for that.
But spend that money wisely if you're not going to spend it on CHIP, and then make sure that you're funding CHIP. Like, where is this money coming from?
Well, if they weren't sending the lottery money to, no, we couldn't do anything. Like that. Well, I tell you something that's very positive indeed. They passed a bill, at least it's come out of committee, unanimously voted for last week, that will allow the statue of Helen Keller and Rosa Parks to be put on the Capitol grounds, Beth. I mean, that's progress.
That's lovely. Yeah, I'm glad Rosa Parks is getting her place in history.
Yeah. I mean, you would.
And Helen Keller is a great socialist too, so that's good.
That's true. They
Good
don't
news for the
know
far
that
left.
Helen.
You didn't know that until I told you earlier.
Yes, I did. I did my Alabama history in 4th grade.
Well,
They don't teach that in the history.
Rosa Parks deserves it. I believe Helen Keller does too. However, I'm afraid, Susan, the reason that Helen Keller is getting her statue with Rosa Parks is because
She's a white woman?
yeah, they had to have equality there.
They couldn't just
I don't
Rosa
think
Parks.
they know she's a socialist, though. So
No,
let's wait
no.
until
Yeah, they're
late
gonna-
May when they find out that she was a raging socialist.
Listen, I mean, come on. These people couldn't pick Rosa Parks out of a lineup if she didn't have one of these things.
She'd be the black one, Bill.
Okay, there's that. Anyway, I mean, seriously,
It's true.
it's really nice that our
That's how narrow-minded
state,
they are.
after how many years, 60 years, has finally said, well, you know what? We got Jeff Davis on the Capitol grounds. We can actually put a civil rights leader up there. We had an oppressor.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
But
It
they'll
is.
find a way to kill it at the end of May.
Yeah, I probably
Yeah, because you
say.
just
Don't
told her that
forget
she's a
about it.
socialist, and now they're going to pull her down.
I'm sure we could raise enough money to put a statue up there if they don't want to pay for it, if they'll just say, okay. But before we leave today, we've got a very special message from our friend Jack Campbell. Hi, darn.
Hello, everybody. This is Jack Campbell calling from physical therapy. I really appreciate all the people who have asked where I've been the last few weeks on the Voice of Alabama Politics. The fact of the matter is that I had foot surgery. In fact, I don't have a foot, and due to diabetes, and which I would encourage everyone to take care of themselves. And if you have signs of diabetes, make sure you tend to it. I'll be back soon, I hope. Here at Physical Therapy in Montgomery to Encompass
That's a lot,
Health.
guys.
This is my friend Sarah, who's my physical therapist. She's worked with me and making me strong so that I can come back soon. Hopefully in a different boot, hopefully with a semblance of a foot. Thank you all for your cards and phone calls and texts. I really appreciate everything, and I look back to being back and being a curmudgeon real soon.
Well, we're so glad that Jack's doing. He's just recovering. He's in great spirit.
He's in an excellent spirit. Of course, he's entertaining everybody in the physical therapy and all the, you go in and they're like, we're going to go see John Campbell, and they, out of all the patients they have, oh, he's in room such and such.
Yeah.
You know, so he's having a good time, actually.
Yeah, it's good to see him. I went and saw him a few days ago.
Well, we love Jack. He's a good man. All right. Well, you've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.